led to the abolition of the constitution, exercised related killings, and of critical institutions like the judiciary and the legislature. General liberation struggle was widely embraced because of the promise to end impunity, especially extradition killings, and restoring the country onto its essential journey towards good governance, rule of law, and unity. Although general government has over the last 27 years, there are those who think that the reverse gear, considering how the 1995 constitution enhanced brutality, political intolerance, corruption, and even mismanagement of elections. But the map took care of self is important to reflect as could make or break this in the coming years, and the state constitutionally and as critical since it is vital in shaping the affairs of the country. Even a law society, one of the duty bearers as far as constitutionalism and the rule of law is concerned, has organized several activities to commemorate the rule of law day under the theme the rule of law in Uganda 50 years under independence. So Madam Speaker, we seek the opinion of two distinguished legal on the rule of law and are these pre-ignition theories what needs to be done further entering the rule of law and Mr. Kizito also had just our second guest, Mr. Oscar Kihika, senior partner at Byenkya, Kihika and company advocate. Also, President Emeritus of the Uganda Law Society. Most welcome, Mr. Kihika.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Kihika, to what extent has the rule of law been entrenched in Uganda?
I think it's important that we first understand what the rule of law is. Most people definition of the rule of law. Just the rule of law is a term for which much is not known. Well, let me put it this way. For which much is said about. But in reality, each of these is understood. Because there is no one definition of the rule of law. And this perhaps on account of the fact that there's never been any definition of the rule of law.
Any classic definition.
And up to today there is no classic definition of the rule of law. It keeps on evolving from century to century. If you will allow me to be a little bit philosophical and give you a historical background of the concept of the rule of law. You see, the rule of law, in general terms, is a reflection of what is about governance, the concept of governance. Okay. The rule of law in the Roman terms related to the governance of society in Roman terms. There's a different concept about the rule of law in terms of governance post-Roman terms. Okay? Now there's total anarchy. Okay? The rule of law after the post-Roman times, where you had the Roman Catholic Church and then you had the absolute monarchy, that represents the rule of law. And then after the French Revolution, for those of you who
in the 17th century,
came up with a new concept of the rule of law. So the definition of the rule of law has changed from over time. Now, today, what I can tell you as a scholar who law, when historical perspective, historical background, in perspective. In general terms, when we talk about the rule of law, we mean the Western tradition of governance that can be traced back to the Roman Republic. When we talk about the Roman Republic, remember, those of you who registered, At one time there was the Roman Empire. It didn't work. It broke up. Okay? And gave birth to the current republics that we have in Europe. The German, the British, yeah, and so on and so forth. Okay? And eventually, because of the internal historical struggles, political struggles that happened in Europe, as has happened in Uganda, right? We then had what you had, the liberal constitutionalism that developed. Okay? The most common or widely known is the French Revolution, which introduced the modern constitutional regime, okay, which then is what is the basis upon all our constitutions, be it the Ugandan constitution, the British constitution, and the unwritten constitution is what they call it the liberal constitution, because prior to that, in the Roman, people must understand this, in the Roman Empire, the emperor or government had absolute power. That was authoritarianism. Yes. That was ruled by law. That was the rule by law. And we have certain aspects of that even in our government today, and I will explain that today. I will explain that to you today, even through our history. As opposed to the rule of law.
Let's try to understand that concept. I mean, it's a word of physics, could come to be tautological.
Yeah.
Rule by law is probably the using of the rule to achieve the narrowness of the ruler. Rule of law is the using of the law to achieve natural justice.
Absolutely. But so the rule of natural justice is something that is basically collectively over a period of time. Okay? Perhaps you are now forcing me to jump. It's interesting, yeah? I'm sure. You see, in the colonial times, there are very few of the Ugandans who are alive today who might even listen to this program, but you'll understand this concept. But I'll tell all of you today from the studies of your time. We, in the colonial times, were ruled by law. In more recent times, those of you who are alive when Amin was ruling us, we are ruled by people. That is the rule by law. That is where government creates the law and it is above the law. Yes. As opposed to the rule of law, where nobody is above the law, be it government, be it the judiciary, be it the individual. The sacrosanct principle is that the law is what governs us. I hope you see that.
Yeah, we're submerged under the law.
We are subject to
rule by law. Some heads are above the water.
Yes, exactly. I hope I
think it's coming through.
I hope it comes through very quickly. So when we say that it's in those circumstances, it's very difficult to define what the rule of the law is. Apart from giving examples and apart from giving principles, the constitutions are the ones that give the principles upon which the rule of law is based, as opposed to the rule by law. Yes. Okay? You see, Hitler between 1932 and 1945, when he came into power, with the Nazi Party, decided to adopt regulation of society of the rule by law. He's the one who said that by edict, by decree, Jews are non-citizens of Germany.
He wakes up in the morning.
Yes, in the morning. And he said by law that these Jews must be killed. Just like that. That is the rule by law. Okay? If we come back to Amin's days, he woke up in September 1972 and said that the Asians in Uganda expelled because they are not citizens of Uganda. That was the rule by law. As opposed to the rule of law.
It comes down to the constitution based on the rules of national.
Exactly. And you see, in Uganda, that's where the president of our history comes in, and we come to this one. Because between 1962 and 1967, there was a semblance of the rule of law. And then, come 1967, there was a rule by law.
The pigeonhole constitution.
Exactly. Because the government decided that it was going to rule by law and it was above the law. It would decide, okay, today, what the law is going to be. And to break the very law that it imposed. I hope I'm being very clear.
It's coming through.
I hope the listeners will understand the difference between the rule of law and the rule by law. And then I hope the viewers understand that you cannot have any proper definition of the rule of law. The rule of law, just defined, is based on the principles that are enshrined in the Constitution. The first time, I think, in my own academic opinion, that we had the principles of the rule of law was in the 1995 Constitution. Why? Because the rule of law is the contract between the government and the governed, where they agree on a contract, and the religion say that, look, we agree that government is going to be restricted in the amount of power that it has in order to determine the rights of and civil liberties of the individual. And how is this going to be done? It's going to be done through institutions. 1, the executive, 2, parliament, and 3, the judiciary. That's where the beauty of the 1995 Constitution was. At that point, Uganda was doing extremely well. We said it on the right note. Tragically, and I'll say this tragically, and I'll be very candid, yes, and I will ask, I'll be on record to be one of those people that my fears rolled down when the 1995 Constitution was being promulgated, because I thought this was an historic thing to mark, and we had a new dispensation of where we were going. However, at the risk of being prosecuted and blah blah blah, I will say this for the record. Yes. And I'll say this for the record because being a supporter of this government, I feel let down. Probably very many other cities. Because over the period of time, the Constitution that was promulgated, I remember this was 1995. It was 95, about 5 days or so before Independence Day. Yes. I remember this day. It was a very emotional time because I remember myself, what I served in the night of exactly. My late father was for the record, I'll state this, my late father was commissioned to compose a song from the new Constitution. And all of us were very proud about this. Today, okay? And I will state this without fear. I will, if government wants to prosecute me today, I will say it. Say it for the record. And I will say it for the record. That the spirit in which we started the 1995 Constitution today, I believe, I want to state this for the record, that I'm talking for my own capacity, I'm not talking on behalf of the Uganda Society, I'm talking on the Uganda Society. But I want to say this, that the citizens of the Republic of Uganda have been laid down.
The spirit, I remember the spirit. I'd like you to talk to us about the spirit and the letter of the law. I remember in 1895 they did this time, just before independence. We sat on the lawns of the Uganda. It was an environment of abandon. We called it internalizing the Constitution. It was an historic day.
It was a very historic day. We thought that, this was the new dawn of Uganda.
Talk to us. What is the spirit of the law? What is the letter of the law? How do you feel the government has abrogated the spirit of the law, if indeed?
Well, if you look at first and foremost, I need to go back into the definition of what the rule of law is.
Yes.
Okay, because I kind of got carried away. I was being perhaps philosophical. when we're talking about the rule of law in general terms, we mean a Western tradition of governance that can be traced back to the Roman republics. After the when we talk about the Roman republics, you remember the Roman Empire?
The Roman Empire.
It eventually broke up. The current nations that you see today, Germany, Britain, France, Greece, and all those are the post-Roman republics, which have become their nations. Okay, and eventually, at first they had what you call monarchical rules and dispensations, where the monarchy had absolute power. Okay, and they didn't care whether the parliament made rules. The monarchy would say no.
In France, the rulers say, "L'état c'est moi." In other words, the state, I am the state.
Precisely. Okay. Then you had the revolutions, that came in to say that people had the power. Okay, and eventually that's when you had the current the liberal constitutions that we have today, which then divested the power from the monarchy, okay, and divided into three
arms of government.
The executive, parliament, and the judiciary. Okay, so that's the basis upon which you have the liberal constitutions that we have today, a factor of the Western governments. Okay. Now, eventually, this is where what people must realize is this: the tragedy about the African governments, okay, is that whereas the European governments had the liberal constitutions and were being ruled by the principle of the rule of law, when they colonized us, and this time I'll use Uganda.
In Africa, yes.
In Africa, and I'll use Uganda.
Yes.
Let's forget about our neighbors. The British came and ruled us by law.
Contrary to what they
were using back home.
Yes.
And I'll go to basic, simple things. For example, when the British decided that the Indians should be the only ones to engage in trade, that was the rule by law. And Africans should not have access to trade. That was the rule by law. Okay? And that was the principle upon which Uganda was governed, right?
Yes.
Come independence, and this is where the problems of Uganda actually started, was that the ruling class then adopted the principle of the rule by law and not the rule of law.
Yes.
Even the constitution. If you study, and I've studied when I made an academic study, the 1962 constitution was in effect really the rule by law rather than by the rule of law.
The 62 constitution.
Yes. You know why? Because that's
the federal constitution.
On the basis of it, it was mixed. On the basis of it, yes, it had the federalism and it had some of the civil liberties included in there. But then you see, it still had the residual rule by law elements
of the colonial government,
which then gave government of the day after independence was granted to give them powers to act in a draconian manner, to the disadvantage of interests. For example, the interests of Buganda, and interests of people that were looking for a liberal form of administration.
Yes.
So those that were pushing for a liberal form of administration were then either incarcerated, because the government of the day was ruling by the rule of law, not by the ruling by the law.
We're going for a break, but before we do that, could you give us your opinion in one or two sentences?
Yes.
Why you say the NRM has abrogated the spirit of the constitution?
Unfortunately, what has happened is this. In the rule of law, okay, I'll go through
very briefly.
Very briefly. And one of the tenets of the rule of law is this: it recognizes that there are three arms of government. You have got the executive, the legislature,
and the judiciary.
Okay, I'll start with the judiciary. Today, I was in court before the principal judge.
Yes.
He, without fear or favor, asked me, and when I told him that I was coming to this program, he told me, he says, you know what, government considers the judiciary as just a department of the executive.
We have to go for a break. This is Spectrum Radio, and tonight, Uganda at 50. How would you rate the country in terms of the rule of law and constitutionalism? We'll be back after this break. We've just been joined by our second guest, Mr. Peter Mulira, senior partner at Peter Mulira and Company Advocates. He's a senior and seasoned lawyer. We'll be back. Stay tuned.
1, 2, 3, come on, we go, we go. Uganda Prince, we go. It's our time, we go. No matter what, we go. We have to win, we go. We never stop, we go. We never rest, we go. We have to score, we go. Strong and better, we go. We go, we go. Uganda Prince, we go. It's our time, we go. We go, we go. Come on, Byenkya. We must win. We go, Uganda Cranes. 13th October 2012, Mandela National Stadium, Nambole. Uganda Cranes versus Zambia. Brought to you by FUFA and
MTN. Everywhere you go.
The Woolworths Quality Sale is now on. Get up to 40% off selected fashion clothing at Woolworths Metroplex Mall, Northern Bypass, Nalia, and Garden City Shopping Centre, Lower Kololo. But hurry or you'll miss out. Woolworths, the difference.
As we celebrate 50 special years, Nile Special invites you to toast to our great land. Nile Special, the rich, rewarding taste from the source. You've earned it.
When I sip from the Nile.
Not for sale to persons under 18.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
Welcome back on Spectrum tonight, Uganda at 50. How would you rate the country in terms of the rule of law and constitutionalism? And you will be able to call into this program tonight. Our guests, Mr. Peter Mulira, senior partner at Mulira and Company Advocates, is a senior and seasoned lawyer in this country. Mr. Oscar Kihika, senior partner at Byenkya and Company Advocates, president emeritus of the Uganda Law Society. Mr. Mulira, you joined us in the second part of this discussion. Would you say Uganda has arrived in terms of the rule of law?
Well, to start with, I think the rule of law is the basis of democracy. If you don't have the rule of law, then there is no democracy, and in that sense Uganda would not have arrived in the sense you have put your question. What do I understand by the rule of law? I understand the rule of law to mean a government which acts according to law. And there are certain ideas which we have to take into account. For example, law and order must prevail over anarchy. In other words, laws must be the basis on which government operates. And then the running of government must be in line with the law or the provisions of acts of parliament properly passed and agreed to.
Properly passed.
Yes. And lastly, the rights of the state must be balanced with the rights of the individual. Now, if we look at these 3 points, we can ask the question, where is Uganda today? There have been a number of complaints. For example, if I start with the last idea I mentioned, where the rights of the state must be balanced with the rights of the individual. We have had cases where journalists have been dragged to court simply because they wrote commentaries which were not popular with government authorities. And this is not government run according to the rule of law. I would say that if you are to take those kind of incidents into account, then we have not totally arrived. Secondly, there are certain things which bother me. For example, the Constitution of Uganda limits the number of ministers who can be appointed by the president. But that number is now 3 times.
Oh, well, we're supposed to have 21. We have about 70.
Yeah,
almost 4 times.
Almost 4 times.
Almost 4 times.
No, this is not rule of law.
It's a flouting of the Constitution.
No, it is a rule by law.
Rule by law.
By law. When the Constitution was made in 1995, and I'm not going into politics over this, it said that a president would remain in power for only 2 terms. But we changed it, and we said, no, he can stay on as long as he wants. That is rule by law. That is something which I consider to be contrary to the rule of law. We are not talking politics, but when you consider those 3 points I've mentioned, then we have not totally arrived.
Well, let's talk about the rule, the spirit of the law and the rule and the letter of the law. Explain that concept for us, that fine concept for us briefly.
Rule of law means that
the spirit of the law and the letter of the law.
Okay, let me come in through. When you're talking about the spirit of the law, and we're talking about, and this is where we come to the attempt to define the rule of law. It can be defined in 3 principles that are normally enshrined in liberal constitutions the world over, of which, by the way, we have to give credit to the Constitutional Assembly. It adopted a liberal constitution. And these are the 3 principles that define the rule of law. The first one is this. The rule of law is a regulator of government power.
Yes.
I want to repeat this one.
Yes.
That government is not above the law. That government's power is regulated. The second one is that there is equality of everybody
before the law.
Before the law. Whether it is government or
a peasant in the village.
A peasant in the village. And then number 3, the rule of law means a procedure and formal justice, administration of justice, which ensures that the protection of the individual and civil liberties are protected. That is to say, if we find that government is exercising its absolute power to the detriment of the rights of the individual, the judiciary then comes in to adjudicate and control
yes,
the apparent absolute power of the executive, so that it protects the rights of the individual, and so does Parliament. So then you have a balance of power between the 3 organs of government. So those 3 together, right, working in balance, right, operate as, you know, the execution of what the rule of law is in a modern and democratically, you know, governed society, of what we aspire our government to be. The question that we ask ourselves is today is that when we critically look at what our current government, how our current government is being run, is this what we see?
Yes.
Given these 3 principles, is this what we see?
What do you see, you and the fraternity, the legal fraternity?
No. I don't have to be a lawyer, but
Mr. Mulira, you've been around.
I'll add to what Oscar has said, and add that there are 3 other things which we have to take into consideration. There must be a preponderance of regular law. The regular law must be
more prevalent
than anything else.
What's regular law?
Regular law is the law passed by Parliament or other institutions which are given authority to make law.
Compared to what?
Compared to arbitrary law. When, for example, the police comes out and says that you cannot hold a demonstration
at the city square,
and there is no law to prevent that, then that is arbitrary act of government.
Forgive me for interrupting. Now, that is a rule by law. You know, where government is above the law, and it says that, like in Amin's days, to give
parallels?
Yes, I'm drawing parallels, yes. Well, Amin would wake up in the morning and decide.
He had a dream.
He had a dream, and by decree, decided that Asians must be what?
Should go home.
So now, they decided and wake up in the morning and say that, give me a written law where
you can't go to City
Square.
Trample the flowers.
And
but I want to come to the defense of Idi Amin.
Yes, sir.
Because
I want to defend the old man.
Yes, because actually when you go back to that time,
yes,
Amin would make announcements, arbitrary announcements,
roadside,
contrary to the rule of law. But the state law department would go and draft laws,
work backwards
to make sure that the implementation, for example, take the example, one day he announced that I'm not going to allow people to wear skirts which are 5 inches above the knee.
They worked backwards
and made a law at least to ensure
regulating
that the government officers who are going to enforce that decree,
they have a guideline.
Exactly. There is another point There's another point I wanted to mention.
Yes, sir.
The rule of law also requires that there must be equality before the courts of law. In other words, the law should not discriminate between various people. And lastly, the Constitution must be regarded as the consequence of the people rather than the government. I fear that today the idea has developed that the Constitution is a government property rather than the other way round. And this is causing a lot of things.
It's a top-bottom thing rather than bottom-up thing.
Exactly. When the government wants to change the Constitution today, because it has the majority in Parliament, it will go and change it. Whether it is against the common will of the people or not.
All right, Mr. Mulira, time is running out. But talk to us, do you think the legislature is free from the executive as we speak?
Can I button on this one?
Please do.
To be honest with you, the last parliament, I didn't think it was. The current parliament, there appears to be a slight improvement, but I think more should be done.
But I think we have to be very careful in this. We are now operating in a multi-party environment where the whips have powers over their members.
Yes.
And in many cases, the government has used its majority to pass laws which they wanted to pass. And the opposition has been very weak because they are very few in Parliament, because of numbers. And this has created a problem. Because if you are a member of the NRM, you are required to
toe the party line.
To party line. So in that sense, the independence of MPs has been compromised.
Right.
But it is part of the democracy we have put in place.
Having said that though,
yes.
Having said that though, you see, ultimately, and I blame this not on government but on the individual MPs that are being elected.
Yes.
All right. On party lines. Because in the first place, and I'm going to give examples in the UK and in the
US.
In the US, if I stand in the UK on the Conservative ticket, right?
Yes.
But standing for in the constituency of North Yorkshire, for example.
Yes.
Okay? The demands of the electorate in North Yorkshire
will preponderate over the demands of the party.
Of the national. Okay? So they have their own individual needs, which might be at variance with the party needs. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, those of you who have been following the politics in the UK will notice that there is actually tension between the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister on certain policy issues.
True.
Okay?
Nick Clegg and
Prime Minister. That's where all this comes from. Okay? So, likewise, in this multi-party dispensation, okay, when my MP, whom I voted for,
yes,
in Kashari, my local needs were the following: we need water, provided to our farm.
Yes.
We need electricity provided to our farm. Okay?
If the party says no, that's what passes.
If the party says no, and FDC is...
But that one actually is part of democracy.
And that's part of democracy.
And that's where we are. That's where we have to be very careful, because it becomes a dictatorship by the majority. Because one party has so many members in parliament, it can always have its way, with the result that parliament ceases to be responsive.
Okay.
I wanted to mention this point. The rule of law also requires that government must be responsive to the
needs of the day.
Exactly.
Our time is running out. Let's first of all look at some other perspectives. Some people would say, Mr. Kihika, that Parliament these days is working, is taking strong positions against the government, the executive, and we know that it's entrenched the concept that you cannot dissolve. The president cannot dissolve Parliament. The judiciary likewise is passing judgments that are not necessarily popular with the executive. And the executive has been criticized in many other fora. Do you think that would not suffice?
Well, let me tell you something. One, I'm going to be extremely candid on this.
Very briefly, I'd like to hear from the listeners.
Very briefly. I'll tell you this. One, the executive, up until now, because from a democratic point of view, the populace trusted the executive to make the right decisions.
Yes.
And for a long time, whatever the executive arm of government made, the masses followed. Unfortunately, of recent, a number of questionable decisions have been made by the executive, which have made the masses suffer.
Yes.
Okay.
Like which ones? Give us one list.
The most recent was the standoff between Parliament and the executive
over the national budget.
Over the national health, with regard to the health sector.
Health?
Yeah.
And the elderly people.
And the elderly people. Okay. On the one hand, and I'm going to state it here, for the executive which I loved as a supporter
in the past.
No, even up to now I still do. But I'll say it is this: you cannot have in the news, and it is for a fact, to have one individual be compensated 142 billion.
69 billion.
Okay, now 69 billion.
Let's hear from the listeners. This is Spectrum Radio 1.
Now, and then, and then you have how many people suffering from malaria who are dying?
We will have a large number who need 40 billion shillings.
Exactly.
Cases have lasted 16 years and they can't get a penny.
One man gets. As a lawyer, I have represented a client whose land was invaded by the UN, the National Army, NRA, right, in 1996.
Okay.
Having been encouraged by the head of state to invest in agriculture, invested 200 million shillings.
And he can't get compensated.
He can't get compensated.
Let's hear the listeners.
What is that?
This is Spectrum Radio 1. Our number 0414-348-111, 031-226-0, When you call in, please tell us your name and where you're calling from. Well, all are equal. Some are more equal, probably. We don't know. Some of us are not really experts. Spectrum, hello. Your name, sir? Charles. Well, go on. We can hardly hear you, but let's try to get the gist of your. Yes, your name again? Alex. Okay, go on.
I am the first of the gentleman. The pessimism is too much. I mean, there should be some opportunity. 20 years ago, the president of this country would put on, not 2015, would put on a military uniform, walk into the National Resource Council, announce to them that he's selling a bank, announce to them that he's taking action, announce to them that he's returning to them, and the members of parliament would almost salute. It's not the case anymore. He has to beg, he has to cajole, he has to persuade, he has to convince. That means that with no absolute power, he is representative.
All right.
15 years ago, much parliament would stand there until a president
Okay.
appoint a minister.
All right. Let's hear from.
I think the first thing that we are hearing is really not born out of the past. Most people know that government can be restrained by law. It's still not restrained. So law, but people can't have power because of all other. So please, come to Spectrum.
All right. Spectrum, hello? Okay, let's get back to the studio. Too pessimistic around the table.
Well, could you repeat his question?
Well, he says you're being too pessimistic. You know, there have been changes. 20 years ago, suddenly this could not happen. Right now, a major dam cannot be carried forward because, there's a rule of law that has stopped the process.
Can I say this? The problem we have is that when you discuss the rule of law, you discuss ideas which are very strange and uncommon to the average person. We are not talking politics. When I discuss the rule of law and say that it is wrong for the Inspector General of Government to send policemen to stop a rally in City Square when there is no law, I'm not saying that he's wrong. I am saying that first put a law in place before you send your men to go and stop these people, because that's what the rule of law requires. It was not set by us. So when we propagate the ideas of the rule of law and they conflict with the political ideas of certain people, we may look to be pessimistic, but we are not propagating our personal ideas. As lawyers, we are propagating the ideas of the rule of law, the standard to which the state has to aspire.
Let's try to get some context here. If you are a doctor and you they bring someone with gangrene, that's a bad toe, for instance. The gangrene maybe in his foot, and you say it's a serious issue. It's not that he's going to die, but the foot is really badly off. You have to isolate that to look at the local problem. Is that the kind of...
No, even the doctor. I'm saying that the doctor...
Okay, we've lost them. Go on, sir. Go on, sir.
The doctor does not act in a vacuum.
He will say the foot is badly off. The man might not be bad, but the foot
will say that the foot is bad
in a bad way.
But before you amputate, you have to go through A, B, C, D, E procedures.
Okay, let's hear from another listener. Spectrum, hello?
Sorry to call again. Is it allowed?
You please go on.
I think it's unfair for to say that common people don't understand what the rule of law means. I mean, the heading is in the center. It means law is the one that is ruling. So, for example, if you're not happy with the decision of the Inspector General of Police, you can challenge it in a court of law.
Okay. Can you stop over there? Huh? Can you stop over there? Can you stop over there? Okay? You see, this government, on the paper, states that it supports the rule of law. One of the aspects of the rule of law is that it must support, right, the judiciary. The example I've given is that the judiciary must be empowered, right, to adjudicate that exactly that dispute.
But there is no law.
Forget about the law. Excuse me. I was listen. I was with the PJ and he asked me, without any fear or favor,
the principal judge.
Today, I was having a case before him. He was expressing his frustration. No, listen. He was expressing his frustration and saying, look, I do not have enough personnel, which is supposed to be appointed by the executive to determine the conflicts, the conflicts here. Right. 2, the personnel that are appointed, right, are not even remunerated enough. 3, the executive, listen to me. The executive arm of this government today consider the judiciary not as a separate arm of government, but as a separate department of government. No, listen. No, listen to me.
Let's hear from him.
Listen, let me speak. The result is this, and you must listen to this to me very carefully. The result is this, that judges are paid between 3 and 5 million shillings a month.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
other executive officers are paid between 20 and 30 million shillings.
43 million for one official in this capital.
Exactly. Do you know what is happening? The results. Don't say no. I am a lawyer. I know what happens here. I know what happens. I know what is happening in this sector. Listen to me. You listen to me.
Okay, let's.
No. I'm summarizing on this point, and I'm being emotional about this one here because I have not worked in government. My earnings comes from interaction with the judiciary.
Yeah.
Okay. Listen. You listen.
Let's hear from me.
You listen. No. On this one here. I have always been.
Let's hear Mouses is on the line. Let's hear more, then we'll get to respond. Go on, sir. Go on, sir.
The case that you don't have the rule of law because of the judicial salary is astonishing. If a judge is paid 5 million, a policeman is paid 200,000. A magistrate is paid 800,000. An Ironman, a soldier in Somalia who's putting his life on the line and dying for that freedom is paid about 7.
Let him conclude it, then we get back.
No,
go on, sir, Alex. Let him surprise
this one here. With due respect, we have had, as Ugandans, we have had that explanation. Huh? No, we have had that explanation for years and years. Okay.
All right.
No. As Ugandans, forgive me. I have sat here as
all right, our time. Okay. All right, I must thank you very much and stop you there. My dear friend, thank you very much for calling. You made some poignant points, many of them, many of which speak for themselves. Mr. Mulira, can we have a law in the Constitution that safeguards the country from slipping into the rule by law rather than the rule of law? Is it possible?
It is possible. All I'm saying, and our listeners should understand us, we are not criticizing the government. We are saying that because of so many constraints, for example, Parliament cannot pass all the laws which have to be passed to implement the Constitution. There is no time. In Kenya, when they had a new Constitution, they had to pass 49 sets of laws to implement the Constitution. Here we would need about 100. And it takes a lot of time. Meanwhile, the government has to carry out its mandate to administer the country. And it finds itself doing certain things which it has to do, but which are not backed by the laws passed by Parliament.
Yes.
Not because they want to be dictators, but because the situation in the country is such that we have not passed all the laws which are required to be passed.
Do we have hope, Mr. Kihika?
I think we have hope. Huh? I think we have hope. I think we have hope for as long as one thing has to be recognized by this government. They set us on the path of promise.
What is that? How will they do it?
The promise was this. They gave us a constitution. A constitution that set in place institutions. Alright? Institutions which they gave power.
Yes, they need to respect them.
They need to give those institutions the power to give us the rights.
Space to operate.
Space to operate.
Thank you very much, dear guests. Mr. Peter Mulira, deep topics we are discussing tonight. We can really dissect each one of them to that bottom. Thank you very much, Mr. Peter Mulira, Senior Partner at Mulira and Company Advocates. He's a seasoned lawyer in this town and the country. Thank you very much for coming. Spectrum, Mr. Oscar Kihika, Senior Partner at Byenkya, Kihika and Company Advocates. President Emeritus of the Uganda Law Society. Thank you for tuning in. I've been your host, Edmond. Spectrum will be back tomorrow. Up next is the news in the English language.